Good afternoon, hello. Welcome to the TriathlonDan YouTube channel. My name is Daniel. This is George, whoever he is.
Hello.
And this is my bike behind me. Now, I am currently going through the motions of swapping this bike. So if there's ever a time for somebody to criticise it, it is now because I don't feel as attached to it. George is an expert in this field and he's going to have a quick run through of the specifications on here and just talk me through which bits he thinks are good and which bits he think aren't so good, and perhaps which parts he'd change if money was no object, or if maybe if some things are good value opportunities. George, I'm going to hand over to you, and I know you're not going to hold back, so feel free to speak your mind. I know you love the colour, so perhaps...
yeah, the colour's an easy win. We like that. That can stay. That can stay.
What do you think about the rest of it?
So, I mean, ultimately, the way that I always approach it with stuff like this is we need to look at what you're using it for.
Yeah.
Right? That's always the first thing. So, obviously, you're a triathlete. Yeah. So we need some sort of triathlon specific part to the bike, otherwise you're just going to be on a time trial bike that might not work for what you need it for. Mm-hmm. So we'll start at the top and work our way down. So obviously what you've done, obviously custom in terms of the hydration part that you've done here. You've turned a bike that doesn't have that into a bike that does, and we like that quite a lot. Anybody that customizes bikes to make it so it works for them, I'm a big fan, because ultimately that's what it's about. It's not about having a bike that somebody in a magazine tells you is really fast. It's about making it so that it does what you need it to. Which brings us to the front end. Obviously, you've changed basically everything here compared to the stock.
Yes, we might not have choice.
Yeah, exactly. And the base bar, right? So if we look at the base bar, we know that the bike is roughly 15 to 20% of the overall drag. So when we look at the front of the bike and we look at how much of the base bar actually isn't compared to the whole bike, we say actually this is making a really small difference. So it makes a difference, but it's a small difference, which means that actually value for money, base bar is something that we would say don't necessarily go mental with unless you're looking to go perfect with it. Don't spend all your money here, because actually what we do then with this bit and what it enables you to do with the position is always going to be more important. So obviously we've got the drag to zero poles, the watch-up pads, with the watch-up adapters as well to make it angled, and as a setup, really nice, right? Now, so for you and how much you like optimizing your kit, this maybe isn't perfect. Okay. And what I mean by that is obviously there are many extensions now on the market that actually might be able to hug the arm a little bit better, make it a little bit more aero. You might get a little bit more support from them, but it's one of the kind of misconceptions maybe of a lot of those pads is that it makes your bike a lot more comfortable. If you look at how a lot of people use them, they still have a gap between the actual the extension and your arm, so you've still only got a contact point at the elbow and the hand. A lot of it really is about the aerodynamics, and so if you're looking to make the front end a lot more comfortable by spending a lot of money on those extensions, that might not be the best solution.
Now, years ago, we would use those USE poles and they were the in thing. Now it's this sort of thing. What sort of replacements would you recommend?
So if you were time trialing, the ones that I have on my bike and I recommend to a lot of people are the Data Jet extensions. Not necessarily the easiest to attach to the bike, but that's part of the process, is finding the right adapters and stuff to make it so it fits each base bar. They're roughly £650 depending on which version you buy, which is quite a lot. It's expensive compared to say this setup, for example, but it's also quite a lot cheaper than the alternatives. Mm-hmm. Now the downside of those for triathlon is that there's no integration in terms of putting a bottle cage in between them. So you would have to customize that. Now if you're not opposed to doing that, then fine. Otherwise, actually we might be looking at something that's slightly different that still makes it so you can get a bottle in between your arms.
Got it, okay. Doing okay so far, though,
yeah, you're doing all right. Okay. You're doing all right. Obviously, the little stuff that we still like to look at as well. Wahoo placement and also the mount. So the mount, obviously 76 projects, big fan. They serve a massive purpose in terms of making it so that your Wahoo or Garmin is in the perfect place with loads of adjustability as well. It's a really clever design. They've done a really good job of it, and it fits most extensions as well. So this is what I always recommend people when they come in for bike fits as well. Now we're here, we'll go with the gears. So obviously you've got the SRAM E-TAP 1x, so 11 speed still?
Yes.
Yeah, so by 12, easy win. So we've got the clicks up front, and then you've obviously got the blips underneath here that you've hidden nicely with the heat shrink tubing as well. Yep. We like that a lot. It was something that I did quite a long time ago, and yeah, it's something that obviously is really popular, but it's...
Will Cowan told me he invented that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that claim they invented that. So that's the front end kind of covered. Obviously we have got a few exposed cables at the back, but without a bike that's fully integrated, which obviously would be a different model, this is kind of the best of bad situation, right? And again, you're losing so little here, but you're getting what you need from the position. Okay, so we like that a lot. Saddle, you need to find what's comfortable for you. So we're never going to say this is a good or bad saddle. If you were using just a standard road saddle, I might say, okay, we maybe need to look at that, but obviously we've had many bike fits, so that's not an issue. Storage on the back, again, this is a bike specific storage box. There are storage boxes that aren't bike specific that you can do aftermarket. And we've seen, obviously, there's brands that do them for the bottom part of the frame here to fill in this bit a bit more. For me, I would always say make it functional. So if you're going to put that on your bike, make sure that you're using it for what you actually need. There are some bikes now that obviously, things like the Canyon and the Argon, they have integrated storage. So they'll have like a little window above the bottom bracket and you can pop that out with your bag inside the frame with all your spares in it. So it takes away the need for this a little bit. But obviously it comes down to the age of the frame a lot of the time. Bottom behind the bum, so we know that aerodynamically it's going to cost you 1 or 2 watts each way, so it might actually be a little bit quicker as well. It's individual, it depends on the position, it depends on the type of bottle, the type of cage, and where it actually sits as well. We've seen obviously in the last year now people using 2 aero bottles after like the sub 7 attempt, and it's becoming a lot more popular. But obviously we need to be within the rules, so they need to have some sort of liquid in them. Okay, let's go gears still. So obviously the SRAM 1x setup, it's good, nothing wrong with it. Obviously wireless are really easy to set up as well. 12 speed now obviously gains you the ability to have a 10 tooth on the back, which means that you can have smaller chain rings at the front. But really for you, I would say if you were going to do that, I'd say that it's not a bad thing to do, because you gain the 10, you gain a whole gear, but also you're running 1x, so you're just going to have a massive gear. So for example, if you running a 6211, the equivalent gear would be a 5610. So you could have a much smaller chainring at the front. On some bikes, it's useful, but really it's just choosing obviously the gear then specific for the race as well, because I know that across the course of the year, I'll probably change chainrings at least 2 or 3 times a month, just based on the courses that I'm riding, and how much training or where I'm training and stuff as well.
You've got to think about transition intimidation as well. Biggest chainring you've got.
Obviously, you want it to look like a third wheel, basically. NRG chain?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. So wax chain, again, we know that level of optimization is something that is going to carry on becoming more normal. It's still not necessarily quite there yet. It's always hard when then you're leaving your bike in transition overnight and it gets rained on as well, which is not ideal. But again, it's something more and more people are starting to wax their chains at home. There are obviously people that sell the chains as well, which works. And then you've got brands like Ceramic Speed, obviously, that will do a UFO drip that actually does quite a good job of making a wax chain last longer as well. So there's loads of options for chains, but as long as you're looking at something, that's the important part. So obviously aero skewers, we like that as well. We don't want to have the nice big axle kind of hanging off it. Always good. Disc wheel. I don't hate it, but, so here's the caveat, right? With a lot of the testing that I've done, especially on a frame of this age, a lenticular design, so that kind of the wider shaped wheel has been quicker. The sort of the caveat with that is, can it fit in the frame, right? So it's something that is, there's no one size fits all for this is the right wheel, this is the wrong wheel. It's about the interaction between the frame and the wheel itself. Also very hard to test, because ultimately, if we took this to the wind tunnel to test 5 different disc wheels, to get an accurate result, because the differences are so small between those top wheels, you would probably need for you to not be on the bike. But at that point, what the air interaction between what's happening, what's actually coming past the bike is totally different than if your foot was there going past it. So we do actually need you on the bike, but then you move a little bit and that ruins the whole test. So it's so hard to test those things because the margins are so fine. So one of the biggest differences that you'll find in a disc wheel is actually whether you're on an open road or a closed road. So if you're on an open road, traffic and stuff coming past you, pushing the wind forwards, actually then this acts as a sail and you're basically a boat. And so you get more of a benefit from being on an open road with a disc wheel. So that's why I say if you're on closed roads, there's almost less of a worry with a disc wheel. Yeah, so it's all those sort of things that it's kind of looking at those really fine margins, and it's like I said, you always pick the race, look at the situation, the conditions, and work backwards from that, and that's how you should choose kind of what's on the bike, because it's different every course everywhere. Front wheel is probably one of the only things we haven't covered. Again, tri-spokes is something that have kind of come in and out of fashion a lot, and at the minute, really fashionable again. Yeah. I think a lot of the reason now though is because the design in terms of the width of the rims has caught up. So we're starting to see a lot more kind of deeper tri-spokes with a wider rim, matching the rim profiles that we know from the faster front wheels that aren't tri-spokes. But then obviously at the minute there are two spokes, there's more two spokes coming out now, tri-spokes with sort of crazy shapes on them as well. Again, the big thing with the front wheel is, can you ride it in the wind? Because if you can't ride it in the wind, you're not going to be in position. If you're not in position, then that wheel just costs you an awful lot of aerodynamics, which is a problem. Obviously, don't take it the wrong way. You're not the smallest guy, so you can handle a tri-spoke the same way I can.
It is a big factor though, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, yeah, absolutely. And the lighter you are, the more you need to consider wheel choice at the front end, which in triathlon is almost more important, because if you're traveling abroad, you're probably not taking 4 spare wheels with you to sort of choose from on race morning, which obviously we've seen even in recent weeks with races that have been cancelled or they've said you're not allowed to use a disc wheel. If that's what you've travelled with, then it's a problem. So last part of this, well, actually, first question, ceramic bottom bracket?
Nope.
Okay, there's an easy win.
Okay.
So it's an easy win. However, if we look at bearings that move on the bike, wheel bearings spin a lot more than your bottom bracket bearing.
Okay.
So in terms of where you were going to put money, it'd potentially look that way first and look at the wheels before you go bottom bracket. The bottom line is this is going to go around 80 times a minute. Right, so it's not that much really. The speed of those bearings is not that fast, but it is still an easy win. If you were looking at every single thing, it's something that we could do. We do have 2 power meters on this, which normally means either you're dual recording because you're mad into Zwift, or one of them's broken.
Well, actually 2 of them are broken. So I've got a power meter, but I think I'll perhaps cover that in another video. Ideally, I wanted to use a power meter crank, and then the aero speed play pedals was my plan.
Yep. Makes sense.
Okay.
So there is an example of that behind you as well.
Got it.
Yeah, that is what I would probably recommend. The aero speed play pedals, they're pretty much the only aero pedal on the market. So it makes sense. If we're talking about the full optimization, it's something that we should look at. And in my experience, crank-based power meter in terms of accuracy and consistency, apart from this one, normally the best. Obviously pedals adds in versatility in terms of changing between bikes. So it depends on whether you're prepared to buy 4 for all of your bikes or whether you want one set to move between them.
I think the term is pot committed. I am now, so.
Exactly that.
What do you think about tyres, tubes, etc.?
Yeah, so tubeless. Tubeless, perfect. So
about 400 mil sealant in each one.
Yeah, exactly. The thing is, right, with tubeless, I get this question a lot, and for me, the case is, if you puncture so bad that you're having to get off, then you may as well have tubeless. Because if I puncture with tubeless, there's a good chance that I don't actually ever have to stop, and I'll probably never know I punctured apart from when I have to peel the sealant off the frame. If I puncture with a tube in, I definitely have to stop and change it. Yeah. So the chances of actually just having to stop are a lot less. So especially for a triathlon, it makes a lot more sense to do it. And yeah, ultimately, in time trialing, we're probably looking at putting the minimum amount of sealant in because we don't want to carry the weight, and it's every second counts. For an Ironman, having something that can ruin your race and make it a really expensive day out just because you don't finish, that sucks. So it's pick your battles, and tyres and tubes is something that actually, if you can just make it so you can get round consistently, then that's what I would say. But yeah, in terms of the actual tyre itself, 5000s we know are fast. Are these the TTs or the standard ones? They are the TTs, perfect, yeah. So there's going to be a lot more research done on, I think, these tyres specifically over winter, because we know we've got Veloflexes and Vittoria Corsas to sort of compare to as well, which are generally at the minute the 3 fastest. So the differences now between tyres is so small that we're looking at actually which one of them is one of them going to cost us more in aerodynamics at the front, for example, than it's saving us in rolling resistance.
We've seen people like Joe Skipper run like a Michelin Power on the front and then something else on the back.
And that's exactly it. So we're starting to actually look at what works best with that specific wheel or in that frame. And I think that's one of the things that most people probably need to, before they jump into stuff, take a step back and say, okay, that's been tested on that bike, for example, with that wheel. Is that what I'm using? Because sometimes there's no point in copying stuff if actually it's not applicable to what you've got. And that could be one of the biggest sticking points.
Okay. Well, I'm not too upset, George. Thank you very much for taking the time to do that.
You're welcome.
Cheers.